Hi everyone. Now we are going to discuss about nitrogen cycle, which is one of the type of biogeochemical cycles. Nitrogen is going to be denoted by the symbol N and the chemical element atomic number is 7. At room temperature, nitrogen is going to be acting as a gas of diatomic molecule that is in the form of N2 and which is a colorless as well as odorless. And this nitrogen is going to be the common element in the universe and estimated to be of 70th in total abundance in our galaxy as well as under solar system. On Earth, the element is primarily found as a free element and it is going to form about 78.09% of Earth's atmosphere, including all the gases. And this nitrogen element was first discovered as a separable component of air by Scottish physician called Daniel Rutherford in 1772, who called this nitrogen gas as a noxious air or fixed air. And the nitrogen is an English word which was derived from the French word called as nitrogene, which was coined by a French chemist, Jean-Antoine Chaptal. And the nitrogene means, nitron means nitrogen, and the French gene means producing. So that's how from the nitrogen, the actual English word derived is a nitrogen. The nitrogen is going to be considered as a dominant constituent of atmosphere. I told you that it is of about 78.0.9% in the total atmosphere gaseous. So obviously this is going to be present in the dominant, but still it is not available to the plants and the animals where directly from the atmosphere. So nitrogen is an important constituent of various organic compounds found in plants such as proteins, nucleic acids, vitamins, enzymes, alkaloids, etc. And the mobility and the immobility of nitrogen in the biosphere and the geosphere and the conversion of nitrogen to ammonia and nitrates are involved in the process of cycling called as nitrogen cycle. So how can we define a nitrogen cycle? So that means how we are going to define the nitrogen cycle. So nitrogen is going to be continually entering in the air by the action of denitrifying bacteria and continually returning the nitrogen to the air or cycle through the action of nitrogen fixing microorganisms either by lightning and the industrial production of artificial fertilizers. And whatever the sequence of changes from free atmospheric nitrogen, that is N2, to fixed inorganic nitrogen, and from there to simple organic compounds, and then moving to the complex organic compounds in the tissues of microorganisms, plants, animals, and eventually release this nitrogen back to the atmospheric nitrogen is going to be called as a nitrogen cycle. So whatever the recycling of this nitrogen component from the atmosphere to the living tissues and from the living tissues after their death and decaying, this nitrogen is going to be denitrified into the atmosphere, and that whole process of exchange of this nitrogen between the atmosphere and the organisms is going to be studied under the name called as nitrogen cycle. So here the microorganisms involved in the nitrogen cycle are going to play a very significant role in the operation of this nitrogen cycle, because without the nitrogen fixing microorganisms there will be no entry of this nitrogen into the cellular components of plants as well as the animals. So mainly there are going to be of four major groups of microorganisms which are going to play a crucial role in this nitrogen cycling. Group 1, so the first we are going to classify them into four different groups. The group 1 is going to possess those microorganisms which are capable of fixing the atmospheric nitrogen, that is biological nitrogen fixation is going to occur. For example, combining free nitrogen with the other elements or compounds. Next, group 2. So those microorganisms bring about the production of ammonia. That means from the nitrogen they are going to convert that into the ammonia, and that process is being called as ammonification. Then moving to the group 3, where the microorganism which oxidize the ammonia to nitrite and from the nitrate to nitrate. The process is called as nitrification. We classify them into the group 3. Then coming to the group 4, where the microorganisms are capable of transferring these nitrates to get back to the gaseous nitrogen or nitrous oxide, is going to be termed as denitrification. So that's how these 4 groups of microorganisms are playing a very crucial role or significant role in the operation of nitrogen cycle. So in the nitrogen cycle, the overall process of nitrogen cycling is going to be classified into 5 major steps. The first step is going to be called as fixation of free nitrogen or the biological nitrogen fixation. The second one is assimilation. Third one, ammonification. Fourth, nitrification. Fifth one is denitrification. And we have to remember all these processes are going to be mainly brought about by the microorganisms only. So if you see this figure where we can see the 5 steps. So what is the first step is going to be the fixation of the nitrogen or atmospheric nitrogen by the biological process, isn't it? So here you can see the fixation by the rhizobium bacteria and some sort of fixing soil nitrogen fixers like other Azotobacter, Azospirillum, all those things are going to be involved in fixing the nitrogen in the soil. So this is going to be the first step, that is fixation of nitrogen. Then coming to the assimilation. So whatever the nitrogen that was fixed in the soil is going to be assimilated into the plants. That is going to be called as assimilation. From the plants, it is going to be transferred to the animals, either the plants or the animal products. After their death, what is happening? The dead animals and the plants are getting decomposed by certain microorganisms and converting the whatever the assimilated nitrogen into the ammonification. So this process is going to be called as ammonification. And this ammonification is going to be done by, that means nitrogen is going to be fixed by lightning or the nitrogen fixes. Okay, so this is all going to occur. Even the rain also going to gather that nitrogen that is present in the atmosphere. So this is the third step, that is ammonification. So once the ammonification is done, this is going to be converted into the nitrites and then the nitrates by the process called as nitrification. And this is the form of nitrogen where the plants can easily assimilate the nitrogen in them by the process of nitrogen fixation by these bacteria. Okay, so nitrates is the form in which they are going to have the nitrogen into the plants. So after this, once all the plants has assimilated and from the plants it was transferred to the whatever we call the animals. So all these things, there was an nitrogen in these animals and the plants. Now once they are going to die, these are going to release some sort of compounds and they are going to be ammonified, and after the ammonification I told you that nitrification occurs and some of the plants can again take this nitrogen form, but these nitrates are further degraded and releasing the atmospheric nitrogen. So either by the emissions from the industrial combustion or by the gasoline or by the, that means by the burning of fossil fuels, all these things occurs, and even certain bacteria are also involved in denitrifying these nitrates and releases the atmospheric nitrogen. That process is called as denitrification. So altogether we are going to have the 5 steps in the nitrogen cycle. The first one is the biological fixation or fixation of nitrogen cycle, where we are mainly concerned with the biological nitrogen fixation. Then the second one is assimilation. Then third one ammonification. Fourth one nitrification, and fifth one is the denitrification. So moving to the first step of nitrogen cycle, that is fixation of free nitrogen, or also the biological nitrogen fixation. So here a large number of microorganisms are known to have the ability to reduce whatever the atmospheric nitrogen into the nitrogenous compounds. And this conversion of molecular or atmospheric nitrogen into the nitrogenous compounds by microorganisms is called biological nitrogen fixation. So we will discuss about the biological nitrogen fixation in detail in another video. So here we are just discussing about the nitrogen cycle. So I'm not stressing more on this one. Then moving to the nitrogen fixing microorganisms like bacteria, actinomycetes, algae live freely in the environment or in symbiotic association with the higher plants. That means either in the form of a symbiotic association, for example, if you check the rhizobium, it will fix a nitrogen. Or some of the other microorganisms are freely in the environment and they are going to fix the nitrogen. So whatever how it may be a symbiotic association or free living, these microorganisms are capable of fixing the atmospheric nitrogen with the help of an enzyme called as nitrogenase enzyme. And this nitrogenase is the enzyme involved in the process of nitrogen fixation. So here you can see the reaction how the nitrogen with the help of ATP and in the presence of nitrogenase giving rise to the ammonium ions or ammonia. And along with that, it is also releasing some sort of inorganic phosphate, all the things happening. Then second step is the assimilation. I told you once the nitrogen has been fixed in the soil, plants can absorb the nitrogen, and this absorption is known as assimilation. So the process of absorbing the nitrogen after fixation is going to be by the plants is going to be called as assimilation. So whatever the plants are going to obtain the nitrogen, obviously the animals are going to be obtained either by the plant directly by the plants or by the plant products. So that's how the nitrogen obtained by animals can be traced back to the eating of plants. Okay, then moving to the third step, that is ammonification. So proteins and nucleic acids of dead remains of plants and animals, and even the excretory products of animals, are degraded by the microorganisms with the liberation of ammonia, and this process is called ammonification. Now this ammonification is going to be seen under two steps. That means for the conversion of this nitrogen into ammonia is going to involve the two different steps. One is going to be called as proteolysis and the second one is going to be called as amino acid degradation. So let's see proteolysis. So what is happening in this proteolysis? Breakdown of proteins into simpler forms is going to be called as proteolysis. A number of bacteria such as Clostridium species, Pseudomonas, Proteus, Bacillus, and some soil actinomycetes and some fungi are extremely proteolytic. That means they are having the capacity of breakdowning the what we call as a breakdown of these proteins. Now they secrete, how they are going to perform this means they are able to secrete some sort of extracellular enzymes, namely proteases, and that convert the protein into smaller units called as peptides, and which are then attacked by other proteolytic enzymes, namely peptidases, and these are resulting ultimately the release of the amino acids. And the overall whatever the process, so here you can see from the proteins to the amino acids by the involvement of proteases as well as the peptidases. Then what is the second step? Amino acid degradation. Now these amino acids are going to be further degraded and releasing the ammonia. The amino acids now undergo degradation by the microbial attack and they are deaminated. What is meant by deaminated? Removal of the amino group or ammonium group is going to be called as deamination to yield ammonia. So what is the ultimate result that we have to get is the yield of ammonia. Microorganisms exhibit several variations of deamination reactions in soil, and one of the end product is always ammonia or ammonium ions. So you have to remember the ultimate end product is going to be always ammonia or ammonium ions. For example, here I have given you the alanine as an amino acid and it undergoes the reaction of releasing the pyruvic acid and the ammonia by the presence of alanine deaminase. So this is the first step of what is the third step, ammonification, in which we had the two steps, that is proteolysis and the amino acid degradation. Now we had seen the fixation of free nitrogen, that is nothing but the biological nitrogen fixation. Then we had gone with the assimilation, and then we had gone with the ammonification. Now moving to the next step, that is a nitrification. So what is happening in the nitrification? So ammonia produced by the degradation of manures and the organic matter may not be directly available even to those plants which can use it. So for this, it is readily leached from the soil and usually converted to nitrate with the help of certain bacteria or microorganisms. And this conversion, that means oxidation of ammonia to nitrate, is going to be called as nitrification. So the oxidation of ammonia to nitrate is called as nitrification. And this nitrification is going to be carried by two steps or two stages by specific bacteria. One is oxidation of ammonia to nitrite, and next one is oxidation of nitrite to nitrate. So let's see the first one, oxidation of ammonia to nitrite form. So here in this first step, ammonia is going to be oxidized to nitrate in the soil by ammonia oxidizing bacteria like Nitrosomonas, so which is going to be the mostly one. And then we are going to have the Nitrococcus, then Nitrosovibrio, Nocardia, and Streptomyces. So these bacteria are going to use the ammonia or ammonium ions in a redox pair and transform them into the nitric acid or nitrite ions. So this is how they are going to convert it from the ammonia stage to the nitrite or nitric oxide forms. Now the second step is this conversion of the nitric acid or nitrite ions to the nitrates. So that is the second step. So here you can see the oxidation of nitrite to nitrate in soil is going to be dependent on the activities of bacteria belonging to mainly genera of Nitrobacter. This is the main bacteria which is involved in the conversion of nitrite to nitrate. In addition to this Nitrobacter, we are also going to have some sort of fungi like Penicillium, Aspergillus, Cephalosporium have been reported, which is able to convert this nitrite to nitrate. That means they are able to carry out this nitrification process. And this nitrification process was discovered to be a biological process by Skolsing and Munch in the year 1877. And then Winogradsky isolated the bacteria responsible for biological nitrification in the year 1890. So that's how this oxidation of nitrite to nitrate form is going to occur, where the plants can easily take the nitrate form. Now the last step of this one, which have to be recycled back, is the denitrification. So until now we had seen this one, nitrates. Now the denitrification, here the transformation or reduction of nitrates to nitrogen gas or nitrous oxide by certain microorganisms is going to be called as denitrification. So here you can see that nitrates are being what we call as reduced into the form of nitrogen gas. So obviously this is going to be called as denitrification process. This process depletes the soil of an essential nutrients, that is nitrogen, for plant growth, and therefore it is not desired. So when compared to the other ammonification, nitrification, this denitrification is not going to be desirable. Some important microorganisms responsible for this denitrification process are Thiobacillus denitrificans, Micrococcus denitrificans, then some species of Serratia, Pseudomonas, Bacillus, Achromobacter, and Paracoccus. And the process of this nitrification is completed by means of various steps in the presence of an enzyme called as reductase enzyme. And here you can see the overall reaction of this whatever the denitrification process. So here the nitrate form is going to be converted into the nitrite form, and from the nitrate they are being reduced to nitric oxide form, and there it was reduced to nitrous oxide form, and finally they are going to give the gaseous nitrogen, that is atmospheric nitrogen. So this denitrification process does not occur to any significant degree in well-aerated soil with moderate amounts of nitrates and organic matter. But this denitrification occurs seriously in a waterlogged anaerobic soils with a high organic matter content. So this is what we have to discuss about the different steps of the nitrogen cycle that we have discussed. One is the fixation of nitrogen, then assimilation. So how the plants are getting the nitrogen form is going to be assimilation. So after the assimilation, you are going to have the ammonification, and then after the ammonification, you are going to have the conversion of this ammonia into nitrites and then nitrate form, which we call as a nitrification process. After that, these nitrates are going to be broken down by such a denitrifying bacteria and releasing the nitrogen back. That is going to be called as denitrification. So now what is the significance of studying this nitrogen cycle? Why we are supposed to read this one? Because this nitrogen cycle helps in bringing the inert nitrogen from the air into the biochemical process, that is into the plants, and then from plants to then to animals. And the plants also need this nitrogen to synthesize the chlorophyll, and so the nitrogen cycle is absolutely essential for the plants. And during the process of ammonification, that is the fourth step, the bacteria help degrade decomposing animal and the plant matter, and this helps naturally cleaning up the environment. And this process of nitrogen cycle also releasing the nitrates and the nitrites into the soil, which helps in enriching the soil with nutrients which are needed for cultivation of our crops. And as plants are going to use this nitrogen for their biochemical process, animals obtain the nitrogen and nitrogen compounds from the plants. And even the nitrogen is going to be the integral part of cell compositions of biomolecules. For example, if we check the what called as nucleic acids. So the nucleic acids are nothing but the polymers of nucleotides, and the nucleotides contains the nitrogen bases. Then coming to the proteins, so proteins are the polymers of amino acids. So amino acids main structure is the nitrogen. So like that, they are going to be the integral part of the cell composition, mainly in the biomolecules. And it is due to the nitrogen cycle that animals are also able to utilize the nitrogen present in the air. And the nitrogen is also cycled by human activities such as combustion of fuels and use of nitrogen fertilizers, and these processes increase the level of nitrogen containing compounds in the atmosphere. For example, if the more nitrogen content is going to be present and was gathered in the water bodies like lakes and rivers, that may result in the eutrophication. So this is all about the nitrogen cycle, where we have discussed about the different steps involved in the nitrogen cycle, what is the significance, and what are the groups of microorganisms that are involved in this nitrogen cycling. I hope you understood well. Thank you.